So another aspect of client wireless that I'd like to cover is access and authentication. A very different thing. We've been talking about how clients can access the radios. Over the years that we've been coming to this conference, we have seen a lot of proposals on making wireless easier and more friendly for predominantly for guests and customers. We saw a lot of discussion about Hotspot 2.0. Lately, I've been thrilled to start seeing Passpoint pop up and function, which is probably even more exciting when it works. What's the next move in terms of client authentication and authorization? We saw some cool stuff this morning.
Yeah.
Who wants to jump in there? You want to jump in, Eddie?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. The multi-factor authentication that they were doing this morning, taking advantage of like the Touch ID on the iOS devices, using the picture in your photos library as a second form password to get on. I thought that was I like that idea. I think that's pretty good. It makes it easy on the end user, I think, and it gives you an extra layer of security. And I think that's always the difficult thing, the balancing security and ease of use. Those oftentimes do not go hand in hand. Ask anyone who uses a captive portal, no offense.
But I mean, you just made a very valid point right then, is captive portal.
Yeah.
The fact that it relies on it being triggered as a captive portal, does that now then introduce the perception of wireless is the problem if the captive portal doesn't pop up, if it's not displayed,
let me do an audience poll here. Who in the audience thinks that captive portals are just fantastic and work great?
Are they the bee's knees?
Yeah, oh wait, no, he's just scratching his head. Yeah, okay.
Get out of here, Chris. No.
Yeah.
Great word,
Get-
I would say okay.
Yeah.
Can we get the data center guy back out of the room?
Yeah, really. All right. Now, on that topic.
But
yes.
was it? I wasn't clear on that. Was it a captive portal?
Yes.
Or was it an app that you installed? Because that was
No, it was
The user was the captive portal.
The phone had an app on it that it triggered, so the computer logged in with the user account. It triggered the phone to do the
Yeah,
authentication.
you saw the whole OS 10 captive portal detect screen popped up. So if the detect screen doesn't work, and granted, the whole idea was let's do this once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. But now if that user didn't see that or that window didn't pop up, it's behind all sorts of other stuff because they're click happy like I get where I'll be working on things, alt-tabbing through things, and all of a sudden I'm off the network and I'm not working. Now is it going to immediately jump into the user perception that the wireless isn't working? I'm going to open up a tip.
You know what I think this stems from is we have a fundamental disconnect and fragmentation of the industry between network infrastructure companies and end user manufacturing device companies where, like, why isn't this built into as a standard in the supplicants? We see captive portals as overlays because there is this fragmentation and disconnect, and we have to cross that gap somehow. And HTML and a web browser are an easy way to cross that gap.
And yet I've been an advocate for fast, free, and frictionless Wi-Fi for a long time, for public Wi-Fi. But lately I've been hitting some Hotspot 2.0 sites. Yeah, it's a pain the first time you have to go in and download a profile and you get a cert. But once it's done, it's fast, free, easy, frictionless, and secure.
Yeah,
so there's some really good solutions coming that can take that whole captive portal piece out of there.
But it's taken years to get there.
Yeah.
One thing I think that we're kind of getting away from with this, though, is that wasn't a function of ClearPass. That was a third-party add-on through the ClearPass extension. That was just one method of doing it. There's nothing that says you can't have on your intranet a site to register devices and it automatically do that where you don't get a captive portal. It just doesn't allow the client access. It applies a different ACL until you authenticate it on the phone.
But to Blake's point,
if
that was the case, the end user looks at it and goes, "Oh, wireless is down."
Yeah.
When it has not, that's the perception, and how do we get over that?
So
yes,
it's not wireless.
My point being, there's an infinite number of ways to do this, and that's what ClearPass is offering now. It's how do you want to do it?
But if we're going to have multi-factor authentication, does it make more sense to
But I don't think that was for guests, though.
Eat Bio? Hold on. Can we introduce some sort of Eat Bio or some biometric that can be added to the standard and have it so that your first payload, your first initial association request goes through as your certificate or your pre-shared key, your whatever, username, password, and then the secondary Eat payload contains a biometric signature of some sorts?
Well, I think if
there would
you-
need to be-
I like that idea, and I have to tell you, I kind of cringed when I seen the two-factor on wireless, because we have two-factor everywhere else, right? Seriously, I mean, you go VPN, I mean, and it was only a matter of time that, Aruba or whoever else make it a little bit simpler, right? But I think we need to keep it simple,
Well,
like
the issue with that, we talk about the clients being completely disconnected from the enterprise. You want to tell Apple that they have to put the same fingerprint scanners as Google in their phones.
That's why it's a
That's
biometric
not-
signature of some sorts, that you
So-
register your signature.
Touch ID just doesn't work that way. It's giving access to a keychain.
I'd like to go back to what Andrew was leading at. Not to slam on the Wi-Fi Alliance, but we're going to slam on the Wi-Fi Alliance. You were leading there, and I'll just hand it back off to you.
Push it over the goal line.
How do we get to a point where the manufacturers are actually working together?
Yeah, I loved the
You slam
discussion.
on Wi-Fi Alliance now.
Yeah, I loved the discussion about multi-factor authentication, but I mean, honestly, when we look at the majority of Wi-Fi out there, how many of them actually get single-factor authentication working well?
exactly.
Through a CWP?
No, I'm not being facetious, I'm being serious.
No, I agree.
This industry has not solved simple single-factor authentication, let alone jumping to multi-factor authentication yet. So in a sense, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I like where Keith was talking about Hotspot 2.0. I've been looking at 11U since 2009 when I was in retail. Oh my God, it has tremendous value, but the industry has been so slow to adopt it because the vision isn't there for a complete ecosystem of federated authentication across a common authentication provider. We've seen bits and pieces of it, like with guest access with social media login on captive portals. Didn't like that.
They can learn a lot from EduRoom.
I mean, EduRoom's got it down. It works.
Yeah.
We have a question here from the audience.
The captive portal, I totally agree with you, Keith. Having a secondary captive portal behind an initial authentication is a pain in the ass, and most users do not want to go through that hassle. Having said that, this is kind of like a 1.0 version that they're putting into ClearPass. So the real thing that they're trying to do there is just get the concept in that they can do multi-factor authentication. What they're trying to do is to actually make the need for a captive portal go away, so that that all happens with an API in the background rather than the client having to actually see that. Because if you think about it, they've got the authentication information already from the ADA21S authentication or from one of the other first authentication. They should be able to use that to do a secondary authentication in the background and do the two-factor authentication.
So more like an Apple Pay transaction
So-
where you just walk into some place that has compatible Wi-Fi and it says, hey, do you want to get online, Touch ID now?
So we were talking about having an agent on devices that can talk back. In iOS 9, there was a new API released that specifically deals with controlling the Wi-Fi of the device through an app, where a loyalty app or a corporate app can decide what networks to connect to and how to authenticate and do all that for you. So yes, captive portals as the first 1.0 of this, but with that ClearPass API, you can just have it so that your clients are authenticating. They go in anonymously if they're not logged into the app. They go in as guest. They go in as secure or contractor or whatever based on
And what we need
profile.
to start thinking about as well is what Hotspot 2.0 and Passport do provide is inline provisioning of credentials. So I walk in, it's a secured network, I don't have a credential for it. If I recognize a service provider that has that I have a credential for, I could just enroll in line without ever having to hit a captive portal. And that's part of Hotspot 2.0. And I think hopefully that we're starting to see the confluence of the APIs and the clients and the Hotspot 2.0 from the infrastructure start to align and the multi-factor authentication. So all this maybe eventually comes together and it makes an easy workflow that is still also secure, doesn't rely on captive portals and things that just kind of merge from client.
Yeah.
From a security standpoint, all captive portals are open.
Well, was this morning's demo, was that on a .1x network with MFA, or was that?
Yes,
open?
he was using a .1x network.
So that was a .1x network
That was my understanding.
with captive portal.
Right.
Yeah.
But the issue I have with Hotspot 2.0 is the need to involve a
Party, the
all of the cellular providers in giving that type of access. If
I don't
you're
think
having a
that's part of the
third-party service provider and it's not your enterprise, how many enterprises are going to want to implement a second factor of authentication, a third factor of authentication, if they have to cooperate with some other third party
Well,
outside to get that to work?
And I don't know if you mean that, I don't know, do you realize that that's not a hard requirement for Hotspot 2.0 to interoperate with a third-party a credential provider? You can do it yourself if you have your
Okay.
own credential store. The hurdle there is the complexity of developing that interaction with the infrastructure to actually provide that functionality. So I have an Active Directory credential store. I have some PKI certificate credential store. I could use those and advertise that out as a service provider for my own credentials. Now, they'll have to enroll or already get it on their device somehow, and that's the hurdle, is getting that out, even if you're an enterprise.
But it's a one-time pain.
Right, it's a one-time pain, but it's the back-end development work for the IT teams to make it happen.
Hotspot 2.0 hasn't made that side easy.
And that's
It's kind of
that's what
targeted
this
at the
API
carrier
could be
side.
coming in.
Yeah.
Where,
Right.
this could enable making that easy by embedding it in some other app.
Right, so all the carrier focus on Hotspot 2.0 has kind of glossed over the fact that it's not carrier-specific. It can be done with any credential provider.
Do we have any other comments from the audience? Oh, over here, Tom. Thank you.
Going back briefly to the two-factor discussion around biometrics, I think that something it's important to remember is that if a password gets stolen, you can change your password. But if your fingerprint gets stolen, you can't change your fingerprint. So I thought really long and hard about using Touch ID on my iPhone, and I didn't use it until I was I believed that it was secure, internal to the device. But any comments on that?
That's again,
The way Apple has implemented that's kind of clever, is that the fingerprint is not the password. The
Right.
fingerprint unlocks the lock that contains the password, and that can be changed.
It just simply
Yeah.
tells the app that it can access Keychain. Keychain has a specific password stored for that app that it pulls out. through
right, and that's the key is you shouldn't be looking at copying a biometric. Like, I'm not going to take a photograph of a fingerprint and that's what's going to be uploaded into a PKI server or some kind of key store. No, it's how can I take a signature reading that is computed off of that in some shape or form and then pass that up. The hash
Yeah, you're
is the
talking
important
like
part.
a
Exactly.
biometrically generated hash.
Exactly. That's the key because, Lord knows I ain't giving anybody my fingerprints that I don't have to.